working on something complicated and you want to go on holiday, you better make sure you document it. Not people are going to bug you when you're on vacation.
Write as less documentation as possible, but write it, the important one.
A little bit of shaking and no foundation and you're gone. That's what really, for me, operations is.
Try to go out and see what's out there, how others approach it.
You can't delegate a task to someone without actually telling them what they need to do. Documentation is a cornerstone to delegation.
In Migi, there's a native integration with Notion that you can use to sync all of the calls in the Notion database.
The onboarding process is so crucial. Involve them in every meeting, online, again, remote or in person.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Growth Mentor Live. Today we are tackling that tricky topic of how to train your startup team. I'm Micah McGuire, head of growth here at Growth Mentor, and today I am joined by Janel Loy, fractional operations leader, Mischa van Wieringen, people and operations specialist, and Dan Huru, founder of MeetGeek. Guys, you're definitely going to want to grab your note-taking materials today because this is going to be packed with actionable stuff that hopefully you will be able to implement right after this session. But if you're not able to join us for the full session, there will be a recording available, and you'll have that option to watch that again if you can't stay with us for the full time. Finally, guys, this is something that is highly dependent on your startup's specific scenario. So it depends on your team size. It depends on a lot of different factors. So if you have any questions, please throw those in the chat because we would love to tackle these throughout the session. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Mischa, Janel, Dan, it is great to have you all here today.
Thanks for inviting us.
Right, awesome. So we will go ahead and just dive into questions. So I think the first one that most people have is, at what point do they need to start thinking about training their team? Because I know this is something that if you're part of a startup, it can seem really easy to let that kind of slide by just because you have a million other things you have to do. So it can feel like just another item on your checklist. And I feel like that's very difficult for people to work in. Dan, at what point do you think it's worth it for both founders and team leaders to think about this?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So in my experience, when you just start out and you're a few people, it's ideal that you have as much as pre-training as possible. So you already have a lot of skills that you can reapply. But of course, there are things that you will learn. In our view, at least, in my view, it's usually the on-the-job training. So you have a specific problem, or you are planning a specific activity, and then you kind of try to understand how to plan that better and plan to learn. It can be a training, it can be consulting, it can be anything. But I really believe in training as a follow-on on the problem that you are trying to solve.
Okay.
Not the other way around. Let's do a training and see what we can do with it. Sometimes it can be useful to think like that, but most of the times, from what I see in our context, because you have so much limited time, that's how you have to do it. That's how you kind of accelerate your learning, from my perspective.
Okay. Janel, would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. So I do think that you do need to start training your team as long as you have your first member in. And why is that so? Because the faster the team member understands not just what they have to do in their functional role, you probably hired them because they're really good at being a marketer, being an engineer or something. But the sooner you train them on team norms, team ways of working, and where to find even the most simple documents, you really set them up on the path of success so
Okay.
that they can really perform well in their role and they don't need to go and bug you to find out where documents are. And training doesn't actually always necessarily mean you have to sit down with them for an entire week to download what you have from your brain to theirs. You can layer that in a few different ways. And I guess we can talk about that later.
Yeah, let's go into it, because it sounds like I'm hearing hints of onboarding training here, which I think is a good one to go into, because I feel like that's oftentimes the best time to train somebody, but it's also the most chaotic time because you've just brought on a new person, so you're having to work them into the team. And I feel like founders and team leads, it's very, very chaotic time for them. So
yeah. So for onboarding training, there's so many different ways of doing it depending on team size. And maybe Mischa can speak more to that. I think that she's like really good at that whole team dynamic stuff. But yeah, in my view, you basically need to prepare some async packets, and then you spend some one-on-one time trying to clarify any doubts that they have after they have been through the async packets.
Okay, all right. And I do kind of want to touch on this because and we're going to move more into this for standard operating procedures in a minute, but I do want to talk specifically about doing those async packets for training. I think it can be hard not to kind of like know what people don't know because, of course, if you've been in the company and you've gotten used to these norms, it's very easy for you to say, oh, of course we've done it this way. And it's hard to identify what somebody else might be stepping in and going, oh, wait, no, I didn't know you guys organized things this way. It was done completely differently at my last company. How do you kind of figure out where to start on that? Because that to me, if I'm thinking about like trying to train somebody on where our documents are and things like that, I'm going, gosh, it would probably take me a minute. And I've only been a growth mentor since October of last year, so I'm already used to it.
Yeah, can I jump on in this one?
Yes, please.
Yeah, because I think you can do it in a few different ways, right? And there's a whole different dynamic as well if you're in person or if you're a remote company. Let's put that first. And usually what I say, especially with startups, I'm like, okay, the first person that comes in, like your first fresh new employee that wasn't part of the founding team, because that's different, right? It's like you're like a little club who would know exactly how everyone works, etc. Take them by the hand, like involve them in every meeting, whether that's like online, again, remote, or in person. And then for the next one, you can simultaneously make a list of things that you can easily do asynchronously, right?
Okay.
So at that point, I think from an operations perspective, you always know like, okay, you need to do some things. You need to create a login. You need to get them on the Slack platform, communication tool. You need to get them in the email. You need to get them all the tools that you're using. So that's the first list. But if you're struggling with this, like you mentioned, just take them by the hand, like the first one, create that list as you go. And then for the next person, it'll be so easy. And even what I would suggest while you're doing this, video it, right? Get Lou involved while you're training someone else or while you're doing it for them. Because then you have like, you're doing two things at the same time. But absolutely, onboarding process is so crucial. And when we're thinking about like training, I think it's like people lose so much time in the onboarding process, and it's such a shame just because it's a process that we kind of forget.
Right.
And again, in-person companies, much easier, right? You can literally have someone in the office and be like, oh yeah, now you can go with Janice from marketing, and now go with Rick from, I don't know, sales. That's much easier. But when there's someone remote and they've had one onboarding call with the CEO in the morning, and the rest of their day is nothing because they didn't get any instructions, they didn't receive any information, they're waiting on things to come. So I think in remote, it's very like the contrast is very big.
Yeah. Okay, that brings me to I've got to tackle this one then. What's the best way to avoid that? I mean, I guess would that be a case of if you're dealing with the fact where it is that co-founder team, we'll just assume that this is a first employee because I feel like that first employee basically acts as a guinea pig, essentially. So in those cases, is it best for them to have a call with both co-founders where they just say, hey guys, we're going to set up 1 to 2 hours so we can sit up and talk you through all the stuff that we think you're going to need to do, and then we probably will be pinging you throughout the day with certain things. I guess, Mischa, what are your thoughts on getting those employees off to a good start?
Yeah, I mean, depending on like the role they're going to fulfill, of course. I think quite often, I don't know if you, well, it depends actually. But let's say marketing and sales is like 70% the first employee, right? That side of things, because you're growing and you need an addition on that side. Just like have them circle around with the team. So I would start with introduction with everyone in the company.
Okay.
Because it's still very small. So like it's 5 to 10 people max. Like have an introduction, like get them to plan that in. You can send an email, get them to do it themselves, or you do it for them, and it's just in their calendar for that week. Okay. And shadow calls that they have. So if it's marketing sales, get them to just like have a buddy that's going to and they're just going to be shadowing that person in as much as possible as they do.
Okay, great. And Dan, did you find that was kind of how you guys ended up doing it at MeetGeek? Did you guys do it a little bit differently?
Yeah, so we keep everything in Notion.
Okay.
And it's not an ad for Notion, but it's just one of the tools. and we do assign a body
Okay.
to a new person, which makes sure that that new person, has things to look at and can ask questions too.
Okay.
And of course, like we try, even like in the initial days, we try to involve that person in many interactions, like explain, meet like other people and talk with them. But the most important thing is to have a body, so they know that that body is responsible for that person's onboarding, and we just contribute if they need anything. So that's how we do it. We kind
Okay.
of like set the expectations as well. It doesn't work with everyone, but we kind of set like expectations like, hey, we are giving you stuff, but you also need to be proactive and come back and ask for things, and we will
Okay.
do the best to offer things. We will like take the time to do it, but you also have to have a proactive attitude when you do the onboarding. It's not just us, just one way training, let's say.
Okay. All right. So, and that sounds like to me probably a good thing to look for while you're in the hiring process too, is find those self-starters.
Yeah. Well,
I have
when you're
something.
onboarding, you're too late, but but
Yeah.
but yeah, that's a possible cue, to use.
Yeah. And Janelle, go ahead.
I have something really fun to add about the training. So in the first week, I used to work for a company where we were scaling quite rapidly. There used to be new joiners every week.
Oh,
So
wow.
what happened is that we would create a little mini project. Like every manager would create a mini project for the
Okay.
team member to do. So by the end of the week, you should ship something really small. And because you needed to ship that thing, you would need to like learn the systems, actually go through the
Ah.
training material, because training material that's just videos or a library is very static and it's very boring, because
Mhm.
most people learn best when they actually apply their skills to doing something. Whereas when you're just reading a book with no context or you're not actually taking action on it, it's kind of boring.
Right.
So in that whole midst of shipping that mini project, they actually interact with people, they ask questions, they read the training material, and then they get a better feel of what the company is. And then they also feel proud because they ship something in their first week of work.
Okay, that's actually a really cool idea. It's almost like
Love it.
I hate calling it a work scavenger hunt, but it is to a certain extent. Okay, so that's a great way to get them again involved with that kind of ad hoc on the job training. So that, and I'm sure probably sets up a good culture because they'll know, hey, I have the ability to ask questions. Because I think too, for new employees especially, that can be very, very intimidating to go like, I feel like I need to know everything off the bat and prove, how great I am in the first 30 days. So feeling like you have a ton of questions can sometimes be a little overwhelming. But I do want to kind of take a step back because we've pointed out some of these training materials and things like that. So this is getting into our standard operating procedures. This is getting into talking about how things are organized within the company. If we're talking about our knowledge management systems, and all of that can feel incredibly overwhelming to write if you are at a small startup. So, how on earth do you handle basically just sitting down and making the time for it? Because I guess I know that probably there are some benefits, but I'm sure if you guys are just like a founding team, it's, two of you or three of you, and then you hire that fourth person, it can feel really easy to just kind of wave your hand and like kind of ignore that part. But I'm sure there are certain things that pop up that people will say, oh, hey, where would I find X? And you know the answer because you've been here since the start of the company, but other people don't. And I'm sure with that first employee, it's kind of easy to go, oh, I can just tell them. I don't need to write it down. So how do you recommend that these basically founding teams essentially keep in mind the fact that they need to be kind of writing this stuff down as they go? What's your best advice for that?
Yeah, I mean, I see this all the time in the clients I work with, which is generally startup founders and agency owners.
Mm-hmm.
And it's exactly what you say, right? You're so in the business that you forget to work
Yes.
on the business.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, getting outside help. So I think two parts. Either
Okay.
like head of operations or a COO that can really pinpoint and be like, guys, this is also a project and we're also
Right.
working on this. There's not just sales, marketing, product, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Or an outsider that really facilitates and keeps you accountable for getting this done. I think
Okay.
those two, like in my eyes, you cannot scale, you cannot grow without working on your business.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is hugely in my eyes, because it just baffles me like how far companies go with like zero operations. But I really see it as like the foundation of your business. And just
Okay.
like with the foundation of a house, when a big storm comes, and then I'm kind of like storm being like economic change, whatever, it's gone. So a little bit of shaking and no foundation, and you're gone. And that's what really for me operations is, creating that stable base for your future growth, and also sustainably being able to grow sustainably in the future. So for me, it's
Janelle,
a
anything?
no-brainer. But
No. Janelle, anything to add there?
Yeah, I really agree with what Misha said. I think when you're in the weeds at very early stages, it's so tempting to not want to document stuff down just because you think, hey, we are doing this experiment and we're probably gonna change it next week. But the thing is, if you don't record down your experiments or what you're trying to do anyway, you can't reference them back if you want to go back to the previous version or things like that. So I think
Right.
that in a way does help teams.
Mhm.
Another thing is documentation is really the cornerstone to delegation. You can't delegate a task to someone without actually telling them what they need to do. If you're going to spend every time you're trying to delegate something to someone and you're going to spend half an hour, 1 hour in a call trying to do that to them, with them, rather than referencing old videos or some notes that you have, that is going to suck up a lot of your time as a founder. So I think, yeah, that is something that I also wanted to share. Yeah.
Okay. And Dan, do you have any, kind of stories on how you guys handled this kind of documentation end of things in the early days?
Yeah, so in our experience, we were very frugal about documentation. I think we did more documentation than other startups. We ended up finding out that we just didn't need it, didn't need a lot of it, but some of it was useful. So I think it's hard to determine like which is the actual useful documentation before start doing it, and you have to take that risk sometimes. Like you just
Mhm.
do it, and you end up like in 3 months we don't do this anymore, or we do things differently. So now we have to update everything. I think keeping things simple at the beginning, like even if it's like documentation sounds like 10-page word or something, but it can just be like a one Notion page with simple things that you're doing, and the details can be figured out later. That's kind of the style. So like simplified, lightweight documentation at the beginning, trying to not overdo it, trying not to hard code too much stuff, because
Mhm.
you might end up like you have to think about how much time it takes you to maintain that at some point.
Mhm.
And this, I think, applies for multiple teams. I have a background in engineering, and engineers hate to do documentation. Now there are a lot of tools that can be used to generate documentation on the fly, even from code, even from. So there are better tools today than it used to be like 2 or 3 years ago. I kind of like approach it. Now it's a different story. But at the beginning, I kind of like approach it like, if it feels like a pain, then I'm kind of trying to document it. If it
Okay.
doesn't, we usually skipped it.
Okay. All right.
Hard to find the silver bullet for it. I think you need to spend a bit of time on it. As you
Okay.
grow, of course, you have to have better processes and so on.
Yeah, because it sounds like basically it's either going to be suffer a little bit now or suffer a lot later if you don't do it. So I think, is that kind of like a good rule of thumb that you guys think that these founders should keep in mind?
yeah, and also it becomes a habit, right? Just like any process within the business. I think it's amazing that Dan got this, like that they did this on such a level, because honestly, there's so many companies that have nothing or so little, and it's
Mhm.
just, again, it baffles me that they get so far sometimes. But yeah, you spend so much effort, and time is wasted when you don't do this tiny little part that today might take you 5 minutes a day.
Mhm.
In exactly what Janelle said as well, like in your delegation part, in your onboarding part, in any, it's like I almost see, like, for me, project management and your knowledge base are the center of your company.
Okay.
Everything revolves around it. Like, it's crazy. And I just wanted to add, like a nice tool that I like to use is Scribe. So
Okay.
you can actually video, and then it will make an SOP for you
Oh,
very
neat.
nicely. Yeah, it's a very cool tool. So
Okay. And that
I would
actually, let's go ahead and jump into tools because I think that's a really, really helpful one because I feel like a lot of this stuff, yes, you can do it manually, but surely there's got to be an easier way to do it. So let's just go ahead and jump right into tools. I know not to be an infomercial for MeetGeek here, but like here at Growth Mentor, we use MeetGeek and Loom like religiously. So
yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So I would double down, especially on templates.
okay.
So if you have not, no, I'm not talking about Meetgeek now. I'm just talking about knowledge management tools. So it can be Notion or another thing like templates. There are templates for different types of documentation that you can use, like pages
Okay.
for marketing, pages for I don't know what situation, and those kind of like speed up things. Then you have the AI part, which I mean, we also use Meetgeek internally for generating, not exactly SOPs, but like generating documentation from our calls, or even like just putting, if you have like knowledge KT sessions with new people, you can reuse them later, the recording
Okay.
or even like the summary. So we use that a lot, templates and this kind of content that can be always repurposed. Never do the same KT session two times unless there's like totally different stuff. We actually share meetings with new people, meetings of our like all hands meeting, for example, so they can kind of like
Okay.
understand the culture, see
Mhm.
like what's the interaction. That is more like cultural level rather than documentation, I would say, but it's still a thing that we
yeah,
do.
but again, it's all tied to the knowledge base, right?
Yeah, it's all tied to the
The culture part.
knowledge base, and you can use global search in either Meetgeek or Notion or other tools. So you can kind of like they can search for anything almost and find something that's useful at the beginning, but also like on the job, like in the next weeks. If you search for something, you'll find it quite fast.
Okay.
Someone explained that at some point. So yeah, those are the tools that we currently use.
And Dan, I am kind of interested. Do you guys keep your Notion and your MeetGeek workspaces separate? Do you guys have a way of linking those up? Because I think oftentimes that can be overwhelming too, is if you've got, different recordings in different places, how do you kind of centralize everything? So what are you guys currently doing?
There's two ways. So in Migi, there's a native integration with Notion
Okay.
that you can use to either manually or automatically sync all of the calls in Notion databases or Notion pages, so they can be created automatic or just update the tables. And you can also, of course, like take the link manually and put it in a Notion page if you want to, I know,
Okay.
an all hands call or something like that. So you can also you can synchronize the call or the whole transcript or the summary so that becomes searchable in Notion as well. So you can basically search all the all the knowledge base, including Notion pages, but also like meeting
Okay.
or call transcripts base. So
Okay, very
that's
cool.
how it
So
works.
that's a great way of doing it. I'm learning more and more that automations seem to be the lifesaver when it comes to operations stuff. So, but Janelle, Mischa, you guys please jump in because I'm sure you guys probably have an entire tech stack of recommendations here.
Yeah, Janelle, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of obviously Notion and
Okay.
Loom. So Notion for housing your knowledge base and then Loom for making those videos. So I like to normally keep it simple. I work with many clients and everyone has different sort of systems, but I think the most important thing sometimes is not the tool, is around the process, right? If you're working on something complicated and it's so complicated and you're the only one who knows about it and you want to go on holiday, you better make sure you document it. If not, people are gonna bug you when you're on vacation. So that is like one of the ways I always put in the discipline in the team, that they should document stuff. And another thing is I will always get people to, I mean, I will get team members to peer review each other's documentation. If your documentation is super technical or it's full of jargon, no one's gonna understand it and then it will be useless, right? So
Okay.
I normally get people to peer review like stuff. So what could be helpful, and this might seem annoying if you're a startup who is trying to do many things at once, but it's so important, is having a quarterly update slash cleanup session.
Okay.
So either you have a block of time where everyone goes in and reviews their documentation, or you say, hey, this is documentation week, put aside X amount of hours within the week whenever you find a free block. And you go in and you make sure that the documentation is updated. And that way everyone knows what's going on and everyone has really um, easy access to documents. So other things that Notion doesn't do really well, sometimes I find it's really nice to map out workflows using Figma or FigJam.
Okay.
So that would be another recommendation, especially if you're dealing a lot with processes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for very text-based stuff, I also echo Dan's recommendations on using templates. So some examples of templates I have is like how to, like a simple step guide. And then there's like the entire playbook, right? So you have playbooks, then you have links to the other sites that you're using, the other tools that you're using, the exact Airtable views that you want people to reference,
Okay.
and all that just makes life so much easier. And yeah, for people who are working in automations, what I like to do is I like to have all the automations documented in a single table so you can control F and find them very easily. So that is one
Okay.
just for more of the product automation folks.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. So there's a couple of things I want to hit on in just a minute. I do want to hit on both organization of some of these things and also automation. But Mischa, tech stacks. Let's talk tech.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Notion stuff that you're coming up against, Janelle, I found a very nice replacement for knowledge base. I still personally use Notion, but like for companies that don't want to go through the hassle of making the templates themselves, of doing the search, this might be a bit difficult in Notion still. There's Slite, Slite, and they are great. They are very like hard down on AI. So, you can type in anything and AI will search all the documentation within Slides, so which is the company's dashboard basically. AI templates, you can just pop in a little bit and it will write like an SOP for you or lay out what's important, all that kind of stuff. And it has integrated that you also are reminded that you need to update it. So when you update it, you don't have multiple files, you just update whatever is there. So that's super cool. And you can do it with multiple people, so you can delegate, etc. So I'm a big fan of them because Notion is very open, right? And Slide is actually Notion. They have quite similar vibe and like feel, and but it's really cut down to what you need it to do. And like I said, Scribe for like making SOPs in a quicker video, but absolutely Loom I use very often as well. And I think the rest will go in later. But for like documentation, and this is yeah. And I think in the end, it doesn't. You need to find for like each different company. It's so important to find whatever is a priority for them. If you're like again, if you're a remote company, a knowledge base, that'll be super important.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, like even onboarding, but also like asking questions or like how do I request a holiday or how do I do this, like small questions. You don't want to be bugged constantly on Slack or hey, can you hop on a call?
Right.
That's a new level. So there I would really go towards these kind of tools that have a lot integrated versus like Office people. It's okay to have it on Notion. It's okay to have it even on Google Drive because a lot of information is shared in person.
Here at Growth Mentor, we use Coda, and basically, it's Fatih and Jessica have been super on getting all the documentation down. So it's been super easy. Whenever I got onboarded in October, it was super simple because they already had things like the instrumentation and actions. Guys, that's a big one on the product side is please, please, please put your instrumentation somewhere accessible. It will save your growth and product people a ton of tears whenever they get into Mixpanel and they know what everything is. So that's definitely one that I would recommend more on the product side. But yeah, I do want to go ahead and jump to organization because, like I said, Growth Mentor, very, very smooth for us. But I have been in companies before where it's been kind of difficult to access certain things. So how do you even start organizing this stuff? And I know, Janelle, you mentioned having those clean out days on quarterly, and it kind of reminds me of there's this productivity group that does personal productivity, but they talk about the day of pain, where you basically just have to go through and clear out all the stuff on your list and your inboxes and all of that. So what is there a way to get to where you're doing that kind of in smaller bites rather than, oh, hey guys, we've just had this 1 week and we've had 30 Notion documents created and they're not organized in any way. Maybe we need to get our handle on this kind of quickly. So what's your recommendations for teams trying to get organized?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, make someone responsible.
Okay.
Right? So there's the ownership part. You can make like someone from operations or whatever can make a nicer layout because, our brains look at Janelle work that way, and we're very quick into like da 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 da. This makes sense for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas someone else might just be like whatever, 3 files here, a folder, and that's fine. So you can make the layout, and then you go back to your templates. But the ownership is whoever you choose: a team lead, a manager,
Okay.
an employee. And it's for them to make it a habit and really incorporate it, I would, in the project management tool and have it as a task every week or every
Okay.
month or whatever works for the company, whatever is important, and keep it organized that way.
Great. And Dan, did you guys have any system for this? Is this something that just kind of evolved organically for you guys? How do you guys stay organized?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with Mischa. Kind of like you have you can set a tone for how documentation is happening. But then again, you have responsibilities, and each person will likely surely document the things that they do. So it's kind of like part of the culture. And I don't really believe in documentation sprints. It's more, like I said at the beginning, like you have this thing you're working on, or you do this update, you do this major update in an area. So then you kind of like spend 5% of your time to update things for others.
Okay.
So it's more natural, I would say.
Yeah. And Janelle, any other recommendations here?
So I have thoughts on this. So I think before you even dive into such a big organizational wide endeavor, I think it's really important to start with the why.
Okay.
Why do you want to force people to document stuff? Does it actually help them in their jobs to document stuff? Or is it not actually useful to them? Because people are busy in their jobs, and we are talking about big organizations. So I work in big organizations, like talking about thousands of people in an organization.
Mhm.
They're not going to stop for you just because you declared a documentation day. Like Mischa said, you need to appoint someone who's in charge. In big organizations, you probably need to appoint some champions in like different teams or in different markets to champion
Okay.
that. You share with them the why, and like the more you can get your team excited to see how their contribution fits into the wider scheme of things, the more excited they'll be to document. In one of the companies I used to work for, it worked out really well when we told the sales team to document like some of their wins, how did they approach getting key accounts, because then there was a time for them to show off. So not only are you documenting your sales tactics, your sales procedures, your scripts, and sharing what worked and what didn't, you're kind of gloating and saying, hey, look at me, I'm so great, and I'm sharing this information with you. So everyone pats you on the back, and then there could be some gamification, like awards for the best sharing.
Okay.
Yeah, and all this stuff was even before the days of Notion. So there was a custom intranet that was built for that, and people would upload their PowerPoint presentation. So I think that giving them a little pat on the back sometimes does help. And then showing what's in for them is really important to build that culture of documentation.
Yeah. And I'll say probably some roles I can imagine are going to be more open about that, because I know from the user research perspective, like this is a huge part of it, is having to evangelize to the rest of the company and being like, guys, this is really important that we're doing this. User research is important for us to listen to the users because it's going to help us build better products. It's going to help increase our revenue. So I know that's one of the big things, like the user researchers are constantly wanting to, talk to the rest of the company and, talk about the latest project they've done. So that's really interesting to get other groups involved in that way. And I think that kind of pat on the back is a really great way to do that, because it is motivating, because we talk about adult learning and things like that, and adults are just motivated by different things. So figuring out that why, yeah, completely agree, Janelle, that's incredibly important. Even if sometimes that why is just, well, do you want to do 5 minutes now, or do you want to do 3 hours in a month kind of things? All right, awesome. So I do want to go ahead and jump to What happens whenever you get into an organization and they just realize we're out of our depth on some of this stuff? And basically, that can be from an operations perspective, that can be from they don't necessarily have expertise to basically, say do onboarding or something like that. What do you guys recommend?
I'll go first.
Okay.
What do we recommend? And you're talking about like know-how on how to create onboarding processes or
Yes,
documentation,
basically, because I'm
training.
sure there's a certain point that like founders will go, we are totally out of our depth here with making sure that all of this is we've tried to stay on top of it, but we haven't been able to. So there's comes a point I'm sure you've got to either look at hiring, like you had said earlier, bring in somebody an external.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly. Yeah.
talking to folks like Mischa and Janel on Growth Mentor too.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's my two thoughts actually. Either get someone in-house that really focus on this and like, the mom of the business in that sense, like really keeps it together. Especially when you're smaller. You just need one person, up to like 50, 100, you're fine. And that can be people in operations, it can be head of operations, or project manager, it doesn't matter what the name is, just someone that keeps it all together and makes sure like holds people accountable, like the ownership is there or externally. So, this is the work I do personally as I come in as a consultant. I help you clean up and then you're good to scale and grow further. I really do it in a way that, we look at your goals, where do you want to go, and then we implement it in a way that's actually future proof.
Right.
And of course, when it comes to training and specific like speciality stuff, I would 100% it depends. I think only in bigger organizations it becomes very interesting to look at actual team training. And what I find very interesting that the whole team training thing, but I would love to hear your thought, Dan, because you're also a young startup. I feel like the team training is kind of for the old dinosaurs, these managers, they're like, no offense, but like, 3/4 in their working life and they need to learn how to collaborate better, and it's very low-key stuff. And I don't know, I feel like the people-centric organizations that are created now, that's in my eyes anyway the future of work really, and I see the startups that are focused on that are becoming a success. Yeah, those don't heavily focus on them, but maybe I'm completely wrong and I'm way too much in the starting phase. And then one addition, of course, Growth Mentor or something similar to help founders, managers to specifically help with issues that they're dealing with, but learn from people who've been there before. But I'm really curious, Dan, how do you look at what I just said about about like team training?
Yeah, we haven't. I can't say we haven't. We have done like 1 week team training with everyone. We never did that so far. And I guess like there are times when that is useful. But again, like when you're in a very early phase, and we are still in the early phase, still scale up, but still early, you are still quite frugal and can't afford to have your whole team, your whole 10 people or 15 people team on a entire weekly course. It has to be something really serious that you want to implement, so you can, in order to have that decision. Otherwise, it's always about like if you are planning a new functionality and you need to learn about a new framework, let's say engineering wise, and you know nothing about it. Okay, you have 2 people doing maybe training, consulting, like getting some consultants, talking with an agency, or just browsing, and then they come up with the results, communicate the results to the rest of the team. That's how we do it. Yeah, so you get a part of the team figuring it out, then coming up with conclusions to the rest of the team, and that part of the team is usually responsible. So you have like 2 or 3 people. You don't get the luxury to send everyone to 1 week training, I would say. And again, like even if you have a 1 week training, you sometimes like it depends on what you're working. Sometimes you just need like a specific part of that training, like just like the 2 days are relevant for you. Especially in engineering, like you could spend 1 month learning about a new technology, and you can learn all the tips and tricks and so on. But in reality, those don't matter in the early days. You just need to like kind of like figure it out sometimes on the go. What we usually do when we know nothing about, let's say we know nothing about a specific activity, or let's say we plan to do some X, and then we kind of like try to plan very early about it.
Okay.
So like, okay, then let's get some agency, let's talk with some people, let's browse the internet, let's do an online training, understand what we need to do, figure out a plan. Maybe we start to outsource some of the work, and then gradually learn that to do in house. That can be an option, instead of like just like completely going off doing the training and then you see where it works. So we kind of like plan early. Then we start like with the actual problem to solve, figure out what we need. It's much more effective, I would say.
Okay. It almost sounds like this is kind of like the agile approach to team training, that you're definitely not doing the whole waterfall, let's get it all
Yeah.
planned out far in advance, predict everything. And instead, it's much more along that agile and scrum lines. Okay. All right. Janelle, anything to add there?
Yeah, going back to the original question, I think if founders come to a point where they realize that they really need help, it's probably better to call in help earlier than later. And if
Okay.
they don't have the budget, they can just hop on like one-on-one calls with like some consultants, can come on to Growth Mentor, get some help. And if they have a little bit more budget, then they can hire someone fractionally to help them work through some of their problems. Especially when they're in such early stages, it doesn't make sense to hire a specific person just to handle like team training or documentation, but hire someone who can sort of provide a roadmap for either the founders themselves or someone they appoint in the team to execute on after even that like short fractional engagement or consultation session is over.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Now, I do want to jump on automations because I feel like this one is a huge time saver, especially for startups. But I feel like my first question is, how do you figure out what should be automated? Because I feel like the people kind of fall into one of two camps. They kind of fall into the camp of, I don't want to automate anything because I don't trust it. I don't trust it to always work, something like that. And then folks who just go automation crazy. They just go, we're going to automate everything, whether or not it's really all that helpful. And sometimes that ends up producing junk that then clogs the pipes up further down. So how do you figure out where you need to start when it comes to automating tasks?
I can take this one first.
Yes.
I'm I've done a lot of automation, so probably I'm a bit biased, or maybe too much. I want to do too much automation, so sometimes I find myself like trying to stop myself from automating things. We have a simple flow for deciding. So you start something as an experiment. You don't rush into automating it. You still figure it out manually. If it starts to work, if it's like let's say if you kind of like operationalize it, then you can then is the proper time to automate it, so you can save time to do other tasks. So up until that point, it doesn't make sense. But sometimes you have a problem and you might want to kind of like try to go out and see what's out there, how others approach it.
Okay.
And then you might find out that, hey, this problem has been already thought about someone, and there's this nice tool that is doing it in a different way. And so I would say like experiment, but kind of like try to understand what's out there, in what's possible in terms of doing things differently. That might include automation as well.
Okay. And Mischa, Janel, anything to add here?
Yeah, I think when we think about automation, it might seem very big right now, just like AI, but like if we come back to team training, onboarding, that kind of stuff, an automation can already be a templated email with links, to your knowledge base. Who do you need to contact, or hopefully that's in your knowledge base, right? So the onboarding process can very easily, for example, be automated. And I definitely think that, for example, is something you definitely can do with a few, and again, depending how many people come in. I mean, like Janelle's example before, when it was like multiple people per week, that's crazy. But let's say a normal startup, it's like 5 people per year max, if you're really scaling hard. So having your template ready, sending that off, and then you're done. It's their responsibility if you've mapped it out right. If the it's described right, your knowledge base is right. They just need to follow the steps, and that's already automated. And then the automation besides that is, of course, and you can do it in different ways, right? You can set up an automation by one button in your project management tool that the email is sent, but also someone else is pinged that they need to make an account, or the account is made automatically, so it's very small steps that you can easily automate and save hours with, I think. And then when you go back into more like your project management and your general process optimization, when you look at automations, I think it's the same. Is it as soon as you have tasks that are very repetitive, it's probably time to automate them in some way or another. Because project management tools have great ways to automate things already, from literally you ticking like a task as done, that it moves to the section of done. It's already an automation, but it's little things that make a big difference, I think. So think small first instead of automation.
Anything you want to tack on there?
Yeah, how do I think of what to automate first in a company? I normally think about it in three lenses. First one is, what is the pain of doing this task yourself? Like, how many hours do you waste, or how much brain space do you waste? How much do you feel like your brain is rotting? That's number one. Like, how much time are you wasting, right? And then two is like, how frequent is this automation going to run? If this is a huge brain rot or something, but it only happens once a year, maybe you shouldn't automate it. If it's happening every single week, then yeah, go and automate it. And then the volume as well, similar to frequency. If there's a lot of things coming through, then you do it. And if not, then probably leave it alone. Another thing to think about is, how apt are you at building this automation? If it's going to cost you 20 hours to build this automation because you don't have the expertise or it's too difficult, maybe for a while, it's better to do it manually, or maybe to do something like involving writing really good standard operating procedures and then involving another human in the loop. So maybe that could be an assistant or someone like that, to help you through, because sometimes not everything can be automated through process, especially when it has a personalized touch or requires a lot of thinking. Now with AI, you can put things through ChatGPT API and parse things and things like that, and it's great. But sometimes you really still need the human in the loop to fact check stuff. So then I would say either have a human in the loop, or you do halfway automated and halfway have that human checkpoint. So that is how I would think about, like, systematically how you decide on what you automate and what you don't.
Okay, great.
And one addition, I think also, like, how stable is the tools that you use that you're going to include that automation in, because exactly what you say before, like sometimes they don't run or whatever. That really has to do with the tools, right? So Airtable, amazing. Asana, amazing. Jira, great. ClickUp, Monday.com. You can't really, sometimes you can't really trust them. Notion, so looking at the tools that you use and then seeing how you get that integrated and automated is super important. Like, it's not just a copy paste kind of thing.
Okay. Now, I know that a lot of these, especially these knowledge management tools, have come up with their own internal automations, but I also know we've had Zapier out there for years. Actually just stumbled across a new one myself, Make, that I am trying to learn now. What do you guys use when it actually comes to that automations process to kind of smooth things out? Let's say if it's not in the tools you're already using.
I'm a big fan of Zapier, and I also use Make. But I just think that Zapier is a lot easier to train your team to use. Like, if you have if you have a little bit more technical background, you can use more of Make. But then Zapier is easy to document and easy for you to share with your team. Like, say, hey, you can use these inputs, and then they can create their own Zaps. For Make, everyone can create their own automations, but then it takes a little while more. And then if you have proficient coders or engineers in your team, maybe you don't even use that and you directly call APIs using.
Okay.
Yeah, Make and Zapier, absolutely. Make is way more customizable, but again, longer learning curve. Yeah, but they're really, like, in general, in the no-code space, Make is the tool to go to at this point.
Dan, any other ones that you guys use? Or
No, we use a lot of the built-in automations for the existing
Okay.
tools. We don't use Zapier so much, just for like very small things. So yeah, can't really say here, but we do try to leverage as much as possible the built-in functionality of
Okay. All
the
right.
tool stack that we
Awesome.
use. Yeah.
Awesome. So we are coming to the top of the hour. So I just want to cover just any last advice that you guys have for these founders and these small team leads on basically best practices, things like that. Is there anything that we didn't cover already? Mischa, it sounds like you may have something, or
Dan was gonna go, but no, last advice. Honestly, like, I don't want to say it, but like, I think Dan and MeetGeek are maybe a prime example of what it can be, and Growth Mentor too, when you've just got, like, excuse my language, but your shit together in your company, you can grow so much faster and so much more sustainably. When you say, Mika, that like you guys had a very easy growth and it was very flowy, that's probably because it was very stable in the operational base, right? Things were clear, things were working. And it's like, it's such an overlooked area and such an important one. I can't
right?
like stress that enough. You can't scale without getting this right. Doesn't need to be 100%, by the way. It can be like up to 80 and you're good, but like work on that.
Okay. And Dan, what would you like to say?
Yeah, like just kind of like rewrapping the initial thoughts. For us, the most efficient way to learn is learn when you have a problem
Okay.
and you need to solve it. That's the most efficient way for us. Write as less documentation as possible, but write it, the important one, and use try to always look out and see what other tools out there which can actually help you with documentation, but also like with automation and all the topics that we discussed. Sometimes sometimes it can be, the trigger can be from a tool, so you can just like understand what a tool does, and you can really understand, oh, I never thought that was possible, this is what we can do, I never thought about that. So it kind of like it opens sometimes it opens new options that you never thought about. So it's always like keeping your head up, not just use the tools that you are used to. So I think having someone that constantly looks at this, what can we try new, what approach, what kind of tool can we try, kind of like helps a lot.
Okay. Awesome. And Janelle, your last advice.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. I think it's really important to just have fun with it all. Team training and team documentation sometimes can be really heavy topics, just because some people just prefer to have their head down and work and get their sales done, get the marketing done, get everything done on their own. And this kind of like will seem like a chore. So make it as fun as possible, make it enjoyable, and create that environment around it that people will be excited and thrilled to share with others. So I think a lot of this will be like a cultural thing versus, hey, I'm the documentation police or I'm the training police. Come here and do this. If not, you get access blocked to your computers or something. So yeah, just keeping it light and fun.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Well, guys, where's the best way for everyone to connect with you? Because I know we have resources here. Of course, they can always come to Growth Mentor, chat with Mischa, chat with Janel, but also, MeetGeek. Obviously, guys, if you're not using it, like just speaking from Growth Mentor, like you need to download it and at least try it out. It's very, very cool. It's probably one better like automated note takers that we've seen out there. So we love it. But best places to connect. LinkedIn?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn, website, flowconsultancy.co, but LinkedIn, absolutely.
Okay. So, guys, if you need any help with your operations, of course, Mischa and Janelle both work on this stuff, and connect with Dan to chat it through if you're trying to get this from a founder perspective. And of course, like we said, there's always Growth Mentor too. But with all of that, we will go ahead and wrap up. I hope everybody has a great rest of their day. So, bye, everyone.
Thank
you
you
so much.
Have a good day.